Good afternoon, everyone. I may need Mali to maybe get me onto my presentation. Oh no, I think she's done it. We are it.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I am, as the moderator said, I'm from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, and I'm very privileged to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I was invited to talk about the post-2015 development agenda, but Mr. Serrano, who is here from the Philippines Rural Reconstruction Movement, is actually part of that process. And I believe that he's far better equipped to talk about it. So I'm just going to briefly set the scene with it, and then to give some context for the work that UNTA does that's related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And in particular, I want to talk about our project called Business Schools for Impact, which has been launched at our recent World Investment Forum, which is very much related to this project. So, to set the scene, faced by our major social, environmental and economic challenges, the UN members at the Rio Plus 20 conference, it's very close. At the Rio, is it okay? At the Rio Plus 20 conference in 2012, decided to develop a set of sustainable development goals. It was decided that the set of goals would follow on the Millennium Development Goals, and that it then would form part of the post-2015 development goals. Now, as opposed to the Millennium Development Goals, which are 18 number, there are 17 SDGs with 169 targets, and they sort of roughly grouped in two groups: social concerns and environmental concerns. So they cover poverty, food security, health and education, gender equality, access to water and energy, decent work, infrastructure, and then the environmental issues, climate change, marine conservation, biodiversity preservation, and so forth. And as Lisa, are you struggling to hear me?
No.
I can hear myself reverbently. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, now I can really hear myself. So as Lisa mentioned earlier, what is quite noticeable about these goals is the ambition of them. As she said, it's not only about poverty alleviation, but poverty elimination. And that is, it was because it was decided that the goals would be aspirational. It was decided that the goals would be global in scope, universally applicable, and action-orientated. I mean, I think probably most pertinently from our perspective is that it was decided that these goals would involve wider stakeholder participation, so outside of governmental structures. And this is pertinent because perhaps with the Millennium Development Goals, this aspect was slightly neglected. My organization has estimated that the needs for investment in the SDG sectors per year is at roughly $3.9 trillion. So it's absolutely crucial to involve the private sector in trying to deliver on the sustainable development goals. Let me turn it down a bit because I'm standing on my toes. Okay, it's fine now. I think it's fine. Okay, so in terms of process, the United Nations General Assembly established the Open Working Group in January 2013, and they then came up with a proposed set of SDGs in July of last year. UNGA then adopted the outcome document, which included a decision to launch an intergovernmental process of negotiations, and these negotiations will then feed into forming the post-2015 development agenda of the The process is member-led, and as I mentioned just now, it involves wider stakeholder engagement, civil society, private sector, academia, scientists. And as you can imagine, with 194 member states, it's a fairly complex process. There are several work streams. The United Nations Task Team, the first, which collates the work of 60 UN agencies, the IMF and the World Bank. Then there's the high-level panel of eminent persons, which is a panel of 30 high-level people, heads of state, former heads of state, leaders of civil society that advise the SG on the post-2015 development agenda. Then there's the regional consultations, the national and thematic consultations. There's the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, which is run by Professor Jeffrey Sachs and mostly involves the civil society and academia. And then the UN Global Compact process, which is mostly private sector stakeholder engagement. Okay, then my organization obviously fits into the UN Task Team work stream. So what is it that we do? We're a policy practice center which focuses on development issues through the lens of investment and enterprise. Our work is, it rests on 3 pillars. It's research and policy analysis work, which then feeds into technical assistance, mostly in developing countries and LDCs. And then the third pillar is consensus building among UN member states. And these 3 pillars sort of are mutually reinforcing, so one builds on the other and they speak to each other. So in terms of the work that we do, we, for instance, do entrepreneurship training through our Empretech center, which is based in 36 countries. I regret to say that most of those centers are based in Latin America and Africa. I think there's only 1 or 2 centers in Asia, one in India. I'm not sure about the other. Then we do investment policy reviews. Mostly it's based on the request of governments that want to perhaps improve their investment environment. Another stream of work that is actually quite important that we focus on is international investment agreements, where there has been call for reforms and UNCTAD's actually trying to lead that process and with the I would say agreement of UN member states. Then our flagships are the World Investment Forum and the World Investment Report. The World Investment Forum is sort of a platform for high-level stakeholder engagement. I met someone earlier in the room who was at our last World Investment Forum. It takes place on a 2-yearly basis, and it's for public and private sector, but also civil society and other stakeholders to engage on topical investment development issues. Our last forum was 2 weeks, was last month. Lisa was also there. The World Investment Report is a fairly prominent publication that appears every year on, again, a topical investment and development issue. And then this year, our flagships were both dedicated to investing in the Sustainable Development Goals. I was going to talk about this, but I think it's going to make my presentation too long, so I'm skipping over these next slides. Just to say that UNCTAD has developed an action plan for investing in the Sustainable Development Goals that really puts the private sector at the heart to drive this process, pretty much obviously in terms of financial resources. This action plan was tabled at the World Investment Forum last month, where it was endorsed by member states, and it will actually feed into the process of the formulation of the SDGs, next year into the Conference on Financing for Development in Addis Ababa, and then the ultimate goal-setting conference on the Sustainable Development Goals in New York in September 2015. Okay, that brings me to deliverables on the SDGs, which is the Business Schools for Impact project. And our thinking with this was, how do you support social enterprises and enterprises in low-income countries, low-income regions, through an educational angle? How do you convince business students, who are future business leaders, to recognize the poor as a market and to recognize poor people as business operators that we should engage in to try and have sustainable development outcomes? That's sort of the basis for this project. So at the World Investment Forum, we brought together academics and impact-oriented individuals to discuss this issue. And I collated 4 quotes from that meeting, which I think quite pertinently summarize what this project wants to do. So the first quote from Ted London, who is the director of the Basic Pyramid Institute at Michigan University, says, "We have 7 billion people on the planet. Business mostly focus on only 1 billion of them. We need to change that mindset." The second quote is from Lisa. And she said, "Poverty is not just about low income, it is about capability deprivation. In order for us to solve poverty, we need to be able to engage the poor in an informational way. Future businesses need to understand that social enterprises are vehicles for engaging the poor most effectively." The third quote is from my director of the Investment and Enterprise Division at UNCTAD, and he said, James Jean, he said, "To change the mindsets of investors, business leaders and entrepreneurs, we have to go back to school. The role of business educators is fundamental to help equip a generation of entrepreneurs and managers to invest in communities where they can make a difference." And the fourth quote I couldn't resist, from Vinika Rao of the INSEAD Institute in Singapore, who said, "Clearly this is an idea whose time has come. Emerging market communities will benefit the most from having business school graduates factor into their business decisions." And then I have a story to tell with 3 pictures, and that is sort of, what is the situation now? I'm cheating a little bit because my first quote and my first picture are actually the same. I'm taking that quote from Ted London again, and that is, we have 7 billion people on the planet. The models in most business programs actually teach the skill to sell to 1 billion. How about reaching the rest? The second picture. The problem-solving skills of business graduates are not always relevant to low-income country situations. So for instance, how do you do business if you're faced on a daily basis with electricity load shedding? Or what do you do if a traditional bank doesn't want to extend credit? Do business schools actually really engage with these issues? Yes, there are business schools that do have electives that focus on these type of issues and try to teach these type of skills, but how pervasive, how prevalent are they? The third one speaks about practical experience, and that is, the need is for school placement networks to extend opportunities to lower income countries to provide students the kind of experience that they will need if they are interested in businesses that have impact. At the moment, I'm sure many of you will agree that students graduate and then they go into internships in conventional businesses. Do these opportunities really equip them for understanding base of the pyramid businesses in poor communities and businesses run by poor people? So what is the objective of this program? The idea is to turn the attention of business students to needs in low-income regions, to reorient business education towards proper outcomes, and to teach the skills students can harness to find solutions for development challenges. And the ultimate objectives to see if we can have business models evolve that will encourage investing in the poor, that is in poor regions, in poor communities, in businesses run by poor people. Investing for the poor, identifying the needs that are in poor communities and developing products and services that are affordable and accessible to the poor and that speak to the poor's needs. And the third is then to invest with the poor, help support and sustain social enterprises and small enterprises in low-income regions, for instance, by connecting them to supply chains, that kind of thing. So what is it that we're actually going to do? In partnership with the Global Business Schools Network, the Global Alliance of Management Education, and some business schools around the world, we have started a network already to bring together business school educators, students, enterprises, and like-minded institutions to interact on these issues, to share materials and experiences on these issues, and to get them talking to each other to try and bring about the kind of change that we want in business education. The network is hosted on a web-based platform where we want to bring together key elements that will include course modules, case studies that are focused on program outcomes. And then the second component for me, which is actually probably the most compelling, is again at the practical level, where we create internship opportunities in poor regions, in poor communities, and with businesses that have a different approach. They are either social enterprises, micro enterprises with the poorest stakeholders. This kind of situation to teach students the kind of skills that they can then understand how to approach these type of businesses and start making a contribution. So we have launched the network. It's an incremental process. We are building community. We are inviting stakeholders to join us. Over the next year, we will travel around the world to introduce this network. We will come back to Manila formally for a workshop in November next year. I'm really hoping that we will get some of you to join up. We're already looking at a partnership with ISEA on this, hoping that we could perhaps extend it further, and Professor Tia, I'm also looking to you. And really would like for you to join us and to check out our website, which looks like that. The web address is also provided. I also have some further materials outside. I see quite a few people have already picked up some brochures and some reading materials. Contact with us, connect with us, give us your comments, and please join the network. Thanks for allowing me to have this opportunity.